Could be a huge day for the future of Las Vegas. A decision is expected from the committee discussing a proposed NFL stadium. Several important elements of the $1.9 billion deal will be discussed before a recommendation is sent to Governor Sandoval.
13 Action News reporter Brian Callahan joins us with a look at those issues. Brian.
Yeah, the committee's laid out 3 key decisions it must make before it can send a final report on the stadium and convention center expansion to the governor's office. The first is whether the city of Las Vegas should have a representative on the stadium authority. That's something Mayor Carolyn Goodman asked for at the last meeting and would grow the board from 7 to 9 members. But the biggest debate is over the proposed 39% limit on the public contribution to the project. Stadium developers are opposed to that clause, saying they need the $750 million from the room tax, even if the cost of the 65,000-seat stadium drops below the current estimate of $1.9 billion. The third is a proposal that would exempt the stadium from any new ticket taxes imposed after the stadium is approved. If the committee can make it through all those issues tomorrow, it could forward the plan to the governor. Then it would be up to the governor to call a special session to vote on the proposed deal. Brian Callahan, 13 Action News.
Brian, thank you. And when all is said and done, the stadium will hold about 65,000 people. It's projected to bring a lot of jobs here, about 8,000 full-time jobs to be exact, and we could see hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact here. But the project isn't cheap. We're talking about a price tag of nearly $2 billion. And let's talk about that cost for a bit right now, because someone's going to have to pay for it. The Raiders are already saying they will chip in $500 million. That'll cover about 26%. Sheldon Adelson says he'll put up $650 million, so about 34% there. But the bulk of the cost, 39%, is expected to come from a proposed increased room tax.
There's another element of the stadium deal that isn't being talked about very much. 13 Action News political analyst John Ralston is here to continue our team coverage with more on that. So I'll say the word tax and you fill in the blank.
Yeah, Brian touched on this, and he's right. This is one of the key issues that's coming before the committee, but it hasn't been talked about that much. It's a section of the bill draft dealing with tax exemptions for the stadium. Now, nothing in the current draft exempts the stadium, but a proposal that will come before the committee Thursday, as Brian said, would exempt the stadium from any new or expanded taxes. There's even specific language in here that would allow the developers to, guess what, be reimbursed if the legislature were to expand an existing tax to cover pro football stadium. For instance, that tax, the one Brian alluded to, the live entertainment tax, is added onto tickets at concerts, for instance. But lawmakers like to grant exemptions and add categories to taxes. So, if they add the stadium, guess what happens? Patrons will pay more for a ticket, but that extra money, guess where it'll go, Steve? Back to the developers.
Well, now, things like the live performance tax, that's a relatively new tax that they came up with. So what you're saying then basically is the way it stands now, whatever the tax structure is, that's where it would remain for as long as that stadium is standing.
You can't do anything to the stadium, and if they were to expand the live entertainment tax, there's a special provision that would be in there, because essentially the developers say, listen, if you charge an extra, let's say $1 onto a ticket, that's money that they might use to buy a beer or a hot dog. Not that either of those things will be that cheap at that stadium. But the other side of that is, why shouldn't the public get that money going where it usually does, Steve, which is into the state's general fund to pay for, guess what? Schools and social services, infrastructure, a lot of other things. That's what's going to be debated tomorrow at the committee.
You know, the developers are saying this thing's going to generate so much revenue, it's going to bump all those other tax revenues up anyway, and so leave us alone on this one.
That is what they say, but most economic studies, and our own Riley Snyder and Brian Callahan posted something on this today, most economic studies say these dreams of the big economic jolt from a stadium generally don't come to pass.
Well, keep crunching numbers for us.
I will.
All right, thanks, John.
All right.
Well, we've been covering this story for weeks now, and it has been a long and involved process, but we have made it so easy for you to follow. Right now on KTNV.com, we have an entire section dedicated to keeping you up to date on the stadium happenings with exclusive content from John Ralston and PolitiFact reporter Riley Snyder.
And as always, 13 Action News will continue to be all over the stadium proposal. That includes team coverage with live reports tomorrow on the vote and inside information from John Ralston that you will not find anywhere else.